Hello, good afternoon / good morning. This is Steve Lookner coming to you from the Right Side Broadcasting Studios in Auburn, Alabama. This is the pre-show for the Sean Spicer press briefing from the White House. We cover all of Sean Spicer's briefings. We also do a pre-show and a post-show for them. So today there's a briefing. So today there's a pre-show. And you can leave it right here if you want to see the briefing. Just leave it. It'll come on as soon as Sean Spicer walks out. And he's supposed to start in 33 minutes. Sometimes it's a little later than that. As soon as he starts, Jake will take us full screen to the briefing. And today, so we're actually probably going to do a very short post show today because, so the briefing is supposed to start at 1:30 Eastern. And then at 2:30 Eastern, we're going to bring you coverage of the testimony in the Senate Judiciary Committee from Sally Yates and James Clapper. And this committee is having hearings on supposed Russian interference in the American election in 2016. So Sally Yates is testifying today, and supposedly she's going to be asked about like General Flynn and stuff like that, and also I wonder if she'll be asked about when President Trump fired her because she wouldn't enforce the travel ban. Although that's not really relevant to Russia stuff. I don't know if it'll come up. But she's definitely supposed to talk about, I think, so there was a story out that I remember that she had mentioned something to the administration about General Flynn, and she had told the administration that General Flynn wasn't being honest about his contacts with the Russian ambassador and his contact with Russians. And so she'll be asked about all that stuff. James Clapper, I don't know what he'll be asked about. But we want to bring that to you, so we're going to cover that for you live. It'll be 2:30 Eastern time when that's supposed to start. So, and it's possible, I guess, that if Sean Spicer starts late, there might be a little bit of overlap, hopefully not, between the Spicer briefing and the Senate hearing. We'll figure that out. But that's coming at you. So stay with Right Side today. Watch our coverage. Let's see here. What did I want to talk about? Well, the first thing I want to talk about, so here in the pre-show, we talk about different things Sean Spicer will be asked about. I am sure today is another case of a story which the media will focus on endlessly, and it's actually not that important at all. So an example of this a few weeks ago was the whole Devin Nunes thing, where it was just endless coverage in the media, breathless coverage of this, and it ultimately was not a very important story, at least not nearly as important as the media coverage made it out to be. And there were a lot of other important things that were not being covered because that was being covered. We have another example of that today, and this is a story that I know at least CNN and MSNBC were breathlessly reporting on for several hours straight this morning. And the story is, and also it's a story that I'll tell you what the story is. The story is Obama warned Trump against hiring Flynn. So that's the headline. And also I see in the media, like on Twitter, all these like big journalists are like, oh my gosh, this is, I saw one person who just like posted like, wow. And it's just, so, you know, when you see this headline, there's this implication. The implication when you have this headline out there and you're covering it breathlessly is, oh, so Obama knew that General Flynn was like working with the Russians in some sinister way against the U.S., and he warned Trump and Trump didn't listen to him. That's at least the implication here. But the thing is, as is so often the case with these stories, I actually started reading an article about it. And this was not an article from a conservative source. This was an article from the New York Times. And I get way down towards the bottom of the article and I see, oh, there's this detail about the story which shows it's not nearly as big a deal as like everybody's making it out to be. And it certainly shouldn't be covered the way it's being covered breathlessly and nonstop. And so that detail, I actually just tweeted out about it, but let me pull it up. It's this. So this is from the New York Times article, by the way. It says, all right, now let me go back a second and describe the story a little more. The story is that President Obama met with President Trump in the Oval Office several days after the election, and they had like this 45-minute, or maybe it was a 90-minute meeting. It was an extended meeting, and one of the things said during the meeting was President Obama said, like, warned President Trump against hiring General Flynn. But here's a detail about that. This is a quote from the New York Times article. Mr. Obama's concerns about Mr. Flynn were largely about his management of the DIA, that's the Defense Intelligence Agency. So Mr. Obama's concerns about Mr. Flynn were largely about his management of the DIA and predated the later concerns about his contacts with the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak. So according to the New York Times, not conservative source, to the New York Times, if the warning or the concerns expressed by President Obama were about Mr. Flynn's management at the Defense Intelligence Agency, that's where he was the head of under President Obama. President Obama hired him to be the head of the DIA and then fired him as that job. And President Obama's concerns, which were expressed to Donald Trump, were about his management of the DIA. And stuff I've read has said that, one reason some people don't like General Flynn is he's kind of a prickly guy, and maybe he's not, like, he doesn't get along with his coworkers or his subordinates or whatever. So according to this article, it seems like at least a plausible reading of what went on here. We don't have more detail, but a plausible reading of what went on here is that President Obama basically said something like, this General Flynn guy, he's kind of like an annoying manager. He doesn't get along with the people in the office too well. There's a lot of friction with him, with people in the office. So you might want to stay away from hiring him. Now, if that's the case, I mean, there's nothing sinister about it, and it has no connection to the Russia stuff whatsoever. It's just a guy, like, imagine if you were hiring somebody at your business and this person you were thinking of hiring had worked for a friend of yours, and your friend said, oh, well, that person didn't get along with some people in the office. That's something somebody might say, and it's a very common thing to be said, but it's not like saying the person's like doing something really sinister. And furthermore, I think if that's what President Obama said, it's not like a total crime, wouldn't be a crime, but it's not like a total dereliction of presidential duty to hire General Flynn in spite of that, because maybe Donald Trump thought, okay, this guy didn't get along with people in the office, but maybe that's because he's a little different and I like people who are a little different, or maybe Donald Trump thinks like I like a strong personality in this job, or maybe Donald Trump thought to himself, this is a strike against General Flynn that he's not getting along with people in the office and there's these complaints about his management style, but at the same time there's this other stuff I like about General Flynn and it outweighs that potential negative. So my point is, it just seems like a normal conversation you might have from a former boss of somebody to a potential employer who expresses concerns about the person's management style, and it is in no way sinister. And at least from what I'm reading in the New York Times, they have said nothing which makes us think, which would lead one to think this was in any way, these concerns by President Obama were anyway like concerns based on his concerns that General Flynn was working with foreign countries and trying to work against the interests of the United States. So the problem is, though, when the media covers this, they cover these in these blanket headlines, and it just says, Obama warned Trump not to hire Flynn. And by the way, I have not watched, I've been working, so I haven't been watching the coverage nonstop, so maybe this point came up. But I have to imagine that if the mainstream media was covering this for 2 hours this morning straight, they didn't just say, well, this was maybe a conversation about somebody's managerial style, which didn't have anything to do with the Russia thing. Because if that was the case, I don't see what CNN and MSNBC were talking about for 3 straight hours this morning. So to me, it certainly, if that's the case, this does not warrant 3 straight hours of blanket coverage on a major news network. The information is there in the New York Times article. It says President Obama had concerns about his management. I mean, it just seems like again, I've seen nothing that I've read that says this is related to President Obama's concerns were related to the Russia stuff. But, it'll just watch. Turn on your TV now. I'm sure everybody's covering it, and it's going to be covered. So as we get to the press briefing, I am guessing this is going to be asked about a number of times at the press briefing, again and again and again, and there are questions that can be asked about other things that I think are much more important to the American people, about, say, tax reform or the health bill or policy matters, but we're going to get a lot of questions about this big story. Okay, so that's that. Let's see. It reminds me of when the media made this huge deal about General Flynn's asks for immunity to testify before the Senate. And that was like this giant story for an entire day, and everybody was saying like there was this implication thrown out that there's something really sinister about this, and that him asking for immunity like shows that he was up to something really bad with Russia. And then of course when you read the stories about the articles, you saw way down toward the bottom like the detail, generally anybody who's going to like testify before the Senate, like it's just a normal procedure for their lawyer to ask for immunity. Like, so it really meant nothing, and yet it was being blanket covered as if it meant something really sinister was going on. Same thing, exact same thing here. Also, excuse me, my thing just popped out here, sorry. Also, it's like, this whole General Flynn thing, I need to fix this. It's going to drive me nuts. Sorry, everyone. Oh, I got it. Is this your favorite part of the show so far, watching me put this back on? Great. Now it's back on. The whole thing with General Flynn is just this thing where like, I don't even know if the average person on the street, this is also similar to Nunes, if you ask the average American on the street, who is General Flynn? What was his job? What did he get fired? Why did he get fired? And what supposedly did he do wrong? I think most people couldn't really give you a good answer, like an accurate answer to that. And that is not, I am not saying this to say like people are dumb or people aren't informed. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is the degree to which the average person cares about this General Flynn stuff in any other way besides like, say, a liberal person who just like sees it as a way to get angry over President Trump. But the degree to which the average person cares about the General Flynn stuff actually for what it is, for the actual thing he did and based on just cares about the story itself and not like its sinister implications for Donald Trump, I think is actually quite small compared to how the media talks about General Flynn. Like any little news item that comes up with General Flynn, a lot of the media just goes crazy over it. And I just believe I've said this before and I'll keep saying it. There's a lot of people out there who hate Donald Trump, who never liked Donald Trump, who didn't want him to get elected, and they are looking to jump on anything they can to like make Trump look bad or give themselves hope that he won't get elected again, or make themselves feel better about Donald, or make themselves feel better by making fun of Donald Trump. The same thing happened when that special election in Georgia came up a couple weeks ago, and the Democratic candidate was almost getting 50%, and people were like, a lot of the media was saying like, look at this, look at how bad it is for Donald Trump. And yet they conveniently ignored the detail that in that district, Hillary Clinton only lost it by like a point and a half. And it's just this again and again and again. It's people looking for things that will make Trump look bad and going out of their way to do so. And it's not to say none of this stuff should be reported at all. My point is the importance put on these things and the amount of time spent in them, to me, is so out of proportion to their actual importance and the actual amount of time that should be spent on them. So that's my point here. Okay, it is 1:10 p.m. We are covering the Sean Spicer briefing today. He's supposed to start in 20 minutes. What can I say? Oh, I neglected to say, because I was so upset about that topic and talking about it for a while. We'd love to hear your comments on during the show, as we always do here on the Sean Spicer pre-show. And if you'd like to write in, you can reach me on Twitter at Lookner, at Lookner, or you can email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. Speaking of which, I should check and just make sure I'm caught up here with your messages. Deborah Lee writes in, thanks for the report on this Flynn so-called story, Monday drama, tweet more, I'll retweet. Thank you, that's very nice of you to say, Deborah Lee. Thank you for writing in. Let me get my right side email up here. Make sure I'm not missing any of you there. Okay, I'm all caught up. So, the one thing we've talked about that Sean Spicer will be asked about today is that General Flynn story, and I am guessing he will be asked more questions than he should be asked about it. A lot of repeat questions. Another thing, what else will he be asked about? So, let's see. I'm sure he'll be asked about the French elections. So the French elections, if you missed the coverage, we covered it here yesterday. We covered it not here in in the studio, but we covered it on Right Side yesterday. So you can watch our coverage of it if you'd like. It's up on the Right Side YouTube page. And as many of you I know are aware, Emmanuel Macron won, Marine Le Pen lost, so Macron was more of a centrist, open to immigration, globalist, liberal about the economy, that kind of thing. Whereas Le Pen was more nationalist, restrictions on immigration, maybe shutting down some mosques, more government intervention in the economy, more protectionist. So Le Pen, anti-EU, maybe pull out of the EU, whereas Macron more internationalist, pro-EU. Macron won, Le Pen lost. President Trump did put out a statement. I think he said that he spoke. Did he say he spoke with Macron or that he was just wishing him luck? Let's see. Let me see if I can find this. Here's President Trump's Twitter. President Trump had tweeted yesterday, congratulations to Emmanuel Macron on his big win today as the next president of France. I look very much forward to working with him. I guess they never spoke. I never heard of a report of them speaking. Would they usually speak? I don't know. Don't know about that. I'm sure they'll speak at some point, but anyways, so I'm guessing Sean Spicer will be asked about that and asked about, he'll be asked one question like, did President Trump really want Le Pen to win? And is he upset now or something? And Sean Spicer will just say, no, he'll give the stock answer of, no, he was open. He wanted to let the French people decide. I'm guessing that'll be asked. So those two things will be asked about. Now, it's weird though. It's like, I feel like, normally there's like one big story going on, like regarding President Trump. And I feel like the end of last week, we hit the end of the healthcare story. That was like, we had North Korea, and then we had healthcare. And it feels like the floor is now open. What will the next big story with President Trump be? I mean, the Senate is supposed to, take up the health bill, but that's going to take a while. I saw a report saying they weren't going to start debating it till June, but it's certainly not happening right away. That's going to be a delayed process. And I don't believe tax reform is going to get taken up until the health bill is dealt with. So that's that. North Korea, while they could test a weapon at any time or test a missile at any time, right now things the last few days have been quiet there, so it's certainly not like the big story. So, but I feel like whenever there's like this kind of quote unquote lull, it's very short-lived and something else comes up. So I think something's going to come up very soon based on past precedent the last few months, but I don't know what it's going to be. But I was thinking this because I was just thinking about what will Sean Spicer be asked about. And there seem to be like a lot of little things, but there's not like the big story. I mean, last week there was so much about healthcare.
Of Science at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Dr. Mark Tessier Levine, president of Stanford University, and Dr. Rick Lifton, the president of Rockefeller University. The United States currently sits atop the list of global investors in innovation in the life sciences, responsible for 44% of global research and development. This investment is dependent on the NIH and the important research it funds. In order to maintain our international leadership in biomedicine, we must strengthen the partnerships between government agencies, investors, academics, the biopharma industry, and research foundations. This meeting was an important step in reinforcing that essential cooperation. Moving on, I'm pleased to announce that today, shortly after this briefing, we will release a list of the president's third wave of federal court nominees. These 10 individuals that the president has chosen were chosen for their deep knowledge of the law and their commitment to upholding constitutional principles. 2 of the nominees today came from the list of potential Supreme Court nominees that the president released during the campaign. If confirmed, Justice Joan Larson will be a circuit court judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. Justice Larson is currently serving on the Michigan Supreme Court. And Justice David Straz will be a circuit court judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit. He currently serves as a justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court. The campaign list was put together from input from the Heritage Foundation as well as the Federalist Society. And as the president said last September when it was released, these, quote, highly respected people are the kind of scholars that we need to preserve the very core of our country and make it greater than ever before, end quote. The president followed the principles that were used to guide that list to select the additional 8 individuals. And as I mentioned, the full list should be out very shortly. In terms of the president's schedule for today, this morning he met with his National Security Advisor, General McMaster. He also spoke with the French president-elect to congratulate him on his victory. A readout of that call should be out very shortly. The Prime Minister of Georgia was also at the White House meeting with the Vice President. The Prime Minister then dropped by with the Vice President into the Oval Office to greet the President. And earlier this afternoon, the President had lunch with the Vice President. In about an hour, he'll meet with Secretary of State Tillerson. Secretary Tillerson has also been meeting with several foreign leaders today at the State Department, including the Prime Minister of Montenegro, the Foreign Minister of Slovakia, and the Foreign Minister of Qatar. Secretary Mattis is also meeting with many foreign leaders during his European trip this week to reaffirm key United States military alliances. The Secretary is in Denmark to co-host a meeting with the Danish Minister of Defense with senior leaders from 15 countries that are key contributors to the de-ISIS military campaign. While in Copenhagen, Secretary Mattis will also meet separately with the Minister of Defense to discuss European security and the importance of the NATO alliance, and with the Danish Prime Minister to reaffirm the close ties between Denmark and the United States. In other cabinet news, Secretary Zinke is in Utah today, continuing his 4-day listening tour on the Bears Ears National Monument and Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, putting into action President Trump's April 27th executive order to review these monuments. Secretary Zinke will be accompanied by the governor and member of Utah's congressional delegation and local stakeholders for a morning aerial tour of the million-plus acre monument and an afternoon hiking tour and a roundtable meeting this evening with Friends of Cedar Mesa Museum. While in Utah, the Secretary and other officials are holding daily press briefings on the ground. You can reach out to the Interior Department for more details. And with that, I'd be glad to take a few questions. Kristen.
John, thank you. Former President Obama warned then President-elect Trump against hiring Mike Flynn as his national security advisor. Why did he ignore that warning?
Well, the president doesn't disclose details of meetings that he has, which in this case was an hour-long meeting, but it's true that President Obama made it known that he wasn't exactly a fan of General Flynn's, which is frankly shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, that given that General Flynn had worked for President Obama, was an outspoken critic of President Obama's shortcomings, specifically as it related to his lack of strategy confronting ISIS and other threats around that were facing America. So the question that you have to ask yourself really is, if President Obama was truly concerned about General Flynn, why didn't he suspend General Flynn's security clearance, which they had just reapproved months earlier? Additionally, why did the Obama administration let Flynn go to Russia for a paid speaking engagement and receive a fee? I mean, there were steps that they could have taken that, if that was truly a concern, more than just a person that had bad blood.
And I want to follow up on a couple points because you raised the security clearance. But before that, if a sitting president raises the name of one individual, why wouldn't that give the president-elect pause? I understand what you're saying, the caveats about the fact that he campaigned against Hillary Clinton, etc. But wouldn't that give the incoming president pause?
Well, I think I would not know that I agree with your characterization. He made it clear that he wasn't a fan of his, and I don't think that should have come as a surprise, considering the role that General Flynn played in the campaign, criticizing his.
You didn't give him any pause at all.
No, I think you if you know what we knew at the time, which is that the security clearance that he had been reapproved in April of that year, and they took, not only did they reapprove it, but then they took no steps to suspend it. So the question has to be, what did they do if they had real concerns beyond just not having, not liking him for some of the comments that he made?
It's our understanding, and if you could clarify this, did Mike Flynn not need upgraded security clearance in order to serve as the National Security Advisor?
Oh, he'd been head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. That's the same.
You vetted him as well, correct?
That's the same clearance that the security clearance. We went over this a while ago. Is the same clearance at any level. Once you get it, you get it. For the time that you had, he had his reinvestigation in April of 2016, and the Obama administration took no steps. Not only did they reaffirm that security clearance, they took no steps to suspend it or take any other action.
But did you not vet him yourselves?
Well, you don't vet on a security clearance. That's why you get a security clearance. Everyone in the government goes through the same process. So the answer is that that same process worked for General Flynn as it did for me or for anyone else who works here. There's no difference of a security clearance once it's issued. Zeke.
Thanks, Sean. You said a few minutes ago, Christian, what we know is what we knew at the time. So knowing what the White House knows now, does the White House, does the president believe that General Flynn should not have had that clearance reissued last year, number one? And number two, does the White House believe that General Flynn was truthful when he filled out his SF-86 for that reinvestigation last year?
Well, I'm not going to get into those details. It was obviously that was something that was adjudicated by the Obama administration in April of 2016. They took no steps to suspend that. So that's not really a question for us. It's a question for them at that time.
Well, knowing what you know now, that's in the public
Yeah, I think the
record.
president took appropriate action when he did, once he felt as though General Flynn had misled the vice president, and he took appropriate and decisive action at the time, and he stands by that today.
Did his ties to Russia, did his work as a registered foreign agent, now registered foreign agent for the government of Turkey, lead to his firing in February?
Well, again, I don't think we're going to re-litigate this. The president made the right decision back then, and he stands by that. Hunter.
Thank you, Sean. Last week, officials indicated the Pentagon planned to send the president a proposal to send several thousand additional troops to Afghanistan. Can you confirm whether or not the president has made a decision about sending additional troops to Afghanistan? And if so, when are they going, how many are going, and what is their mission?
Yeah, I'll refer you to the Department of Defense on that. They are in contact with him, but we have nothing to share at this time. Sarah.
Thanks, John. The president tweeted this morning that senators on the Intelligence Committee should ask Sally Yates about her role in classified leaks about General Flynn. Does the president have evidence that ties Sally Yates to the Flynn leaks? Why did he tweet that?
Well, I think you guys are well aware of the president's concern about spills of classified and other sensitive information out into the open. It's something that should concern every American, and the president's made it very clear since he took office that's a big concern of his. And so the idea that classified information made its way into the press is something that I think, while we're asking all of these questions, is one of the ones that I think the senator should ask. How did that information get out into the open like that? I think that is an equally important question that frankly isn't getting asked.
But does the president believe that Sally Yates was the leaker in this?
Again, I think that the tweet speaks for itself. What he's saying is that the Senate should ask those questions. Yeah.
Sean, aside from the announcement today that the president will nominate 10 judges to fill federal vacancies, many conservatives remain concerned the White House is woefully behind on overall appointments. The president recently told the Examiner, paraphrasing, that he doesn't need to fill vacant posts in the administration. After these 10, there will still be 110 judicial vacancies. Does the president still believe vacant administration jobs do not need to be filled? And are there any plans to increase the pace of political appointments?
So there's like 3 questions in there. I'll try to break them down. Number one, we have a very robust schedule of releasing names. There is a method to this in terms of the nominees that are getting put out now, and I think you should expect to see more and more go through. The process this time around is a little bit different. We're actually going through the Office of Government Ethics and FBI clearances before announcing most of these individuals. And so there's a little bit of a difference in how we're doing this, but we are well on pace with respect to many of these to get the government up and running. But the president's point that he was making in that interview was that part of the review of government is to make sure that we're looking at these positions and figuring out whether or not we have the taxpayers getting the best bang for their buck, both in terms of productivity and cost. And so we're looking through the entire government. Director Mulvaney, I think, briefed you all a while ago about how we relook at government and figure out whether or not we can do a better job of filling positions, of staffing the government. But we're going to continue to have announcements on key positions as the week goes by.
Control to the bureaucracy if you don't fill some of these.
We are, and that's what I'm saying. I think that you're going to continue to see, whether it's judicial nominations, ambassadors, other key positions. I think we have a very healthy clip of announcements that continue to go out. Trey.
Thanks, Sean. Ahead of her testimony today, does President Trump believe Sally Yates is a trustworthy source of information?
Well, that's not up for us to decide. I mean, that is up to the Senate to decide whether or not what she does, and we'll have to wait and see what that.
And following up on Sarah's question, it seemed that the president was implying that Sally Yates may have had something to do with the leaked information to newspapers. Is that what he was implying?
I think the tweet speaks for itself. I don't think sometimes you don't have to read too much into it. Richard.
Thank you, Sean. 2 questions on NAFTA. First, the Canadian Prime Minister on Friday said that they're considering, as a reaction to what the Prime Minister calls an unfair punitive duty on Canadian softwood lumber,
right,
considering banning coal imports from the U.S. Is it the beginning of a trade war between Canada and the U.S.?
No, that's why we have dispute settlement mechanisms to do this in a responsible way. The Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, has been in touch with his counterparts over there, and I think, look, there's a reason that the dispute mechanism is set up the way that it is under this particular trade agreement, but under most trade agreements, so that the two parties can resolve them in a way that allows for both sides to air their concerns. But that's why you have an agreement, and that's why you have a mechanism set up to do that.
So you trust the mechanism on this?
No, let's let it play out. But I think Secretary Ross took appropriate action to protect a U.S. industry, and we're going to let the process play out.
And 10 days ago, the president said that Mexico and Canada had agreed to fasten the process to renegotiate NAFTA. What has happened in the last 10 days?
Well, I think our officials will start to. We'll have further updates for you on that. Right now, there's nothing to share. John.
Thanks a lot, Sean. Did Sally Yates have to run any of her planned testimony by the General Counsel's office that she'll deliver later this afternoon?
I'm not aware of it, no.
And also, do you have any reason to doubt that her testimony, which will be under oath, will be truthful before the Senate subcommittee?
I have no, I mean, no. I would assume that when you raise your right hand and agree to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, that you'll do that. That's the whole reason that you pledge. Francesca.
Thank you, Sean. For weeks during the transition, President Trump was not receiving a daily intelligence briefing. He was receiving his information from General Flynn. Do you think that lack of direct information from the intelligence community contributed to the lapse in vetting with General Flynn?
So first, he did get his. I mean, we extensively went over the PBD briefing throughout the campaign. I believe back then it was 3 times a week that he was getting it, and then supplanted by his national security team. They would go in and do that. So I think the premise is not there. Secondly, as I mentioned to Kristen, the processes that were followed by General Flynn are followed by every government employee who receives a clearance at that particular level.
Sorry, on another thing. I wanted to talk about the signing statement that came out on Friday with the spending bill. Senior administration officials, including Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, didn't seem to know about that. Why didn't she or people working on that issue know about that, know it was coming? Whose idea was that? And what happened between when Sarah was out here on Friday saying that she didn't think there was going to be something like that, and then close of business when there was a signing statement? And did you know it was coming?
So signing statements are a pro forma activity that occurs during a bill signing that's performed by the Department of Justice, Office of the Legislative Counsel. It's been used by every president. So I'm not really sure what everyone knew, but that is something that goes along going back multiple administrations.
Can I follow with that on HBCUs from that signing statement, please?
Thanks, Sean. On the travel ban, a couple questions if I may. Back in February, the president said that lifting the travel ban would mean that many bad and dangerous people would be pouring in. Have you seen any evidence that that's been the case in the 3 months since this ban was lifted?
I think that's a question for the Department of Homeland Security.
Well, that's something you've been tracking?
No, I personally know, but I'd be glad to follow up with the Department of Homeland Security. I don't have anything at this time on that.
Okay, in the same vein, if this White House is no longer calling this a Muslim ban, as the president did initially, why does the president's website still explicitly call for, quote, preventing Muslim immigration, and it says Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States?
I'm not aware of what's on the campaign website. You'd have to ask them. I know how we've talked about this from the first day of this administration as a travel ban that's in this country's national security interest, to make sure that people who are coming in here with the right motives and reasons, that we're having a public safety aspect to making sure that we're protecting our people. I think we've been very consistent since the first day of this administration on this.
Is it worth standing here, though, and completely disavowing the use of that phrase, Muslim ban? I mean, if it's still on the website, if the president's words are being used against him in court today, is it worth you clarifying that once and for all?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why I've been very clear. I don't think I need to clarify what we have said or what the president said. Since
it's coming up in court, and if that's
I understand that, and that's frankly one of the reasons that we have concerns about how that's being interpreted, because I think the intent of the travel ban was very clear. I think it was something that the president made very clear in the filings that we have filed, why he did it, the motives for doing it, and he was very clear when he spoke about it from the beginning. So there really shouldn't be any question as to why the president's doing this, and the idea of making sure that we're putting the safety of our country and our people first and foremost. So, Tamara.
Thank you. I've got two topics, hopefully fast.
Okay.
So the Kushner family was in China making a pitch for the EB-5 visa program. This came a day after the president signed the omnibus, which of course extended that program without any changes. So two questions on that. One, is it a violation of the conflict of interest agreement that Jared Kushner came to? And also, does the president believe that that investor visa program needs to be modified in any way?
So I think I would refer you to the company on that. I don't. But this had Jared has done everything to comply with the ethics rules to make sure, and that had nothing to do with him per se. He wasn't involved. And secondly, I think we've talked about this before, that the president and Congress are looking at how to look over the entire visa program, all the various visa programs, and whether or not they are serving the purpose that they were intended to, whether or not we're making sure that we do what's in the best interest of the American worker. And so we're going to continue to work with Congress on that.
Okay, and regarding the opioid commission, it's my understanding that no members of that commission have been named yet. We're more than 30 days into what was supposed to be a 90-day period for that commission to come back with a report to the president. What's up with that, and does that send the wrong signal to people who believe that this is a very urgent crisis where like more than 100 people are dying every day?
Right. Well, let me get back to you on the exact names and the announcement on that. I've got a follow up with that. I think when it comes to the opioid crisis, the president, both during the campaign, the transition, and now as president, has made it very clear of his commitment to figuring out how we can address this crisis that plagues so many neighborhoods and communities, and he'll continue to work with, he appointed Governor Christie in a bipartisan commission. So as soon as we have additional information on that, we will do that. Kevin.
Really why is it important for the president to get these 10 individuals out there to serve the country? And on a more broader perspective of this question, there are a number of vacancies, 129 going into the day, to say nothing of some of the openings over there in the EOB that I'm sure could still be filled. The pace seems slow. Is the president aware of that pace? Is he comfortable with the pace? And what's the White House doing, not just to fill those important judicial jobs, but others that are related to the administration?
So on the judicial jobs, obviously, we're going through it in a very methodical way. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of background that goes on in each of these in terms of the Office of Government Ethics, the FBI background check that goes on. And so they're all in the pipeline. I think you'll continue to see a very robust amount of announcements on not just the judicial front, but on several of the fronts. And we're really, we've been tracking where we are. I think we're well on pace with where previous administrations have been. Some ahead, some a little behind. But we're doing a great job of filling those key positions and making sure that we get the right person for the right job.
Sean, I want to ask you a big picture question about Afghanistan. You were asked about troop levels, and you don't have an answer to that. But last week, the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction painted a very grim picture. Security incidents through March reached the highest level in a decade. Civilian casualties were the highest on record. There's rampant drug use in Afghanistan. So as the president weighs this request for more troops, what's going to be his ultimate goal? Is it going to be stability? Is it outright victory in the 16th, 17th year of this war?
Well, I think number one, he wants to make sure that we defeat ISIS. That is something that is in our national security interest. Make sure that we protect our people, but does so in a very responsible, smart way. I mean, he's talked about not projecting, where he's going and what he's going to do to let the enemy know ahead of time. And part of that guidance and that his national security team is giving him are different pieces that you're talking about. How do we achieve those key outcomes? How do we do what's in the country's best interest and utilize our military and our treasure to the best of our ability? That is something that we're continuing to work on and do, and that's part of what he is getting briefed on and is implementing. It's so I'm not entirely sure if that answers what you're going, but that is what he has been getting briefed on, and that is the kind of decision-making process that is currently underway.
Is the president displeased with the current state of affairs in Afghanistan?
Well, I think he wants to make sure that we do what we can to win, and that's why he charged the generals and other military advisors and national security team to come up with a plan that can get us there. So, Ronica?
Sean, thank you. Does the president believe that healthcare is a right or a product?
Well, I think the president's been very clear in his statements that whether or not you call it a right or not, he wants every person to have access to health care that covers pre-existing conditions, that is affordable. And I think the steps that he's taken over the last week in the bill that he's implemented, that he worked to pass through the House, clearly highlight those priorities. He wants to make sure that people have access to care. He is concerned when he hears about companies leaving the marketplace and not giving consumers a choice. He is concerned when he hears about deductibles going through the roof, costs going through the roof, and people not having the access that they can to health care. And he is very concerned that we are facing a choice right now where Obamacare is failing and dying, and that if we don't act, that people won't have access to health care and they won't be able to afford it. And so the steps that he is taking are to achieve those principles that he's laid out. Blake.
Two questions as it relates to President Trump and former President Obama. Back to that November conversation, were there specific reasons given, and if so, as it relates to Michael Flynn, and if so, was that based on private information?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that, like I said, he passed along exactly what I mentioned to Kristen at the outset, and that's
all. Sean, secondly.
Michael.
Two clarifications. On the signing statements broadly, not just the subject of the HBCUs, are you saying that the president was not aware of the details of that very long signing statement? It was just something done at OLC and
No, that's not. I'm sorry. Yeah. No, the president's obviously aware of what happened. The question that was asked is, it is a process. It is happened for administrations going back, generations. I'm sure. I don't have this precise nature of when signing statements came into being, but this is a normal pro forma piece that goes along with a bill signing to make sure that the executive branch's intent is as understood.
But a lot of the things that were in that signing statement were things that were essentially carryovers from things that Obama had also objected to. And so, but the president and the senior staff here was aware of what those things were and approved those things being in the signing statement. Okay. Second question on the Flynn and the security clearances. You guys have made, both from the podium here and also the president made a big deal of this question of the Obama people gave him the clearance or re-upped the clearance earlier. Are you suggesting now, knowing what you guys know with hindsight and whatever, are you saying that they should have, you believe that the Obama administration should have denied him his clearance back in April based on the information that you're now aware of, connections with Russia, et cetera, et cetera? Are you suggesting that they should have denied it?
No, what I'm suggesting is that you can't have it both ways. The folks who are coming out and saying Obama, expressed some concern about Flynn. Well, number one, it was pretty expected. This is a guy who was very outspoken in his criticism of President Obama's policies. So the idea that President Obama, didn't like the guy doesn't seem shocking. But the point that you have to ask yourself is, if the Obama administration, or under the Obama administration, if they reissued one of the highest security clearances that you can get, knowing what they knew then, and then didn't do anything to take a proactive steps to suspend it in any way, shape, or form, the question you have to ask yourself is, if they were concerned, why didn't they take any steps? They're the ones who had, at that point, all the access and all the knowledge to everything that was on his SF-86 security clearance, not us. So if President Obama or anyone else, frankly, in the government was concerned, the question should be asked, what did they do? And if nothing, then why not, if they really truly were concerned? I think that is a fair question. Dave.
Over the weekend, North Korea detained a fourth U.S. citizen. Are you concerned that they're trying to escalate tensions even further? Do you consider these Americans hostages? And what are you doing diplomatically, back channel or otherwise, to try and get them released?
Yeah, obviously this is concerning. We're well aware of it, and we're going to work through the Embassy of Sweden that has a facility in North Korea, or an embassy in North Korea, through our State Department to seek the release of the individuals there. But I would refer you to the State Department on that.
Sean, thanks very much. Just to follow up on your answer on Afghanistan, you mentioned ISIS, but you didn't mention the Taliban. Should we read that to mean that the focus will be on ISIS?
No, it's to defeat both the ISIS and Taliban. It's to make sure that we put our national security interests first and defeat all of those folks that seek to do us harm.
Are you willing to negotiate with the Taliban?
I think right now the whole point of this is the president is receiving a plan and guidance from his national security team as he had asked for. That guidance is coming forward as we speak. He's continuing to meet with them, and there will be further updates from the Department of Defense as we move forward. As I mentioned at the outset, the president or the vice president has an event. I want to make sure the pool has time to set for it. We're around all afternoon. I will take care. Good to see you. Thank you.
President Obama, was he right about Michael Flynn?
that is time number 2. I forgot to plug in my microphone. I'm going to put up a sign on the floor that says plug in your microphone when you walk in here. My bad. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is the post-show to the Sean Spicer briefing. This is probably the earliest we've been on with the post-show for a 1:30 briefing because Sean Spicer actually started early. He started 15 minutes early, and apologies for the way we went to the briefing. I think I was talking and then Jake cut right to it because I didn't even know he was going to come on then because it was 15 minutes before the scheduled start time. So he started early, and then the briefing itself was, well, I'd say on the shorter side. It looks like about 26 minutes or so, the briefing. So it depends on the day. Can start early, can start late, can start on time, can be short, can be longer. I'm sort of interested, just like in a nerdy way, into why the length varies from day to day. I can't tell. Like, is it just based on how Sean Spicer feels? Does it depend on like whether he has another meeting to go to? There has to be a reason, but I don't know what it is. Does it like depend on how he thinks the briefing is going? So I don't know how much of it is an individual choice by like him, and how much, and like based on just how he's feeling about things, and more, or is it like more kind of institutional reasons, like there's a certain place he needs to be or something, or they just set it beforehand. They say this is going to be a half-hour briefing, and this one's going to be an hour. I don't know. So, anyways, we're here. This is the post show. It's 1:43 p.m. now, and at 2:30 p.m., we are going to go to the live coverage of the Sally Yates and James Clapper testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is doing another hearing on the Russian supposed influence, purported Russian influence or interference in the 2016 election. So we will bring that to you live. That's going to start around 2:30. It's supposed to start. So well, you can't stick around. It's going to be on a different video, but that'll also be at Right Side on YouTube. I didn't even get a chance to say, because the post show was truncated, the pre-show was truncated, and we went to the briefing so fast. I didn't even get to say that I want to just give you donation information. By the way, during the break, so we got some snail mail today, and a number of our viewers actually sent in snail mail donations, which was really kind of you, and we read every letter, and we read them to each other, and we talk about each one and say how happy that makes us. And every single donation is important to us, and it makes us feel good, and it makes us feel like, wow, we need to do the work that much harder to bring this stuff to you. So if you want to make a donation and help us stay in the air, because we cannot be on the air without your donations. Your donations are the big part of our operating income, operating budget. So if you'd like to make a donation, you can either go to rsbn.tv/donate. That's rsbn.tv/donate. Or you can, in the YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, there's a chat room next to us, next to the show. Just click on the $sign at the bottom of the chat room. You can donate that way. Or you can go on to Patreon. So if you're interested in getting stuff for donating, so you can do this thing on our Patreon site where you donate once a month and you get stuff in return, like cool Right Side goodies. Actually, Jake, do you have your hat out there right now? I could show them the hat if you have it out there. Jake's going to bring the hat in. So I'm going to show you an example. Oh, well, you can get a mug. Oh, this is so exciting. Thank you, Jake. Haha, I got your hat. I'm never getting it back. You can get a mug like this. Oops. It'd be good if I didn't hold my hand over the main part of the mug. Here's the mug you can get. There's so many goodies. There's so many goodies. Thank you, Jake. Hold on. Let me hold them all up. There's the mug. There's the pen. I'm trying to click the pen on and off. And the hat. I wonder if I can show you all three in the hat. So we can have the hat, the mug, and the pen. I'm so Right Side today. But all that kind of stuff is stuff you can get on our Patreon site, where we give you stuff for setting up a monthly donation. If you want to know more about that, go to www.patreon.com/RSBN, and Patreon is Patreon. Okay, so there's all of that stuff. So many goodies. I got to order myself a right side shirt. By the way, I'm going to order myself a right side shirt today. They sell them at TeePublic. If you go to www.teepublic.com/RSBN, and TeePublic is TeePublic, you can find other sorts of merchandise. The merchandise you can get the free stuff. You can't get that at TeePublic. So you can't get this mug and you can't get that hat that I just showed you or that pen. But they do have T-shirts, and Jake was wearing a black one today. And I like it a lot. Jake, you're never going to do this, but are you willing to come and show your T-shirt that you're wearing today? I know you're going to say no. What if you don't have to show your face, Jake? I know you're going to say no. Can you walk in here and just show the shirt?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Yay! Because I was wondering how the black one looked, and then Jake's wearing a black one today, and I was like, oh, that's really cool, so I'm going to order one of those. But Jake's going to come in a second and show your T-shirt. So this is Jake, our producer and awesome musician, and he's showing, there it is. Take a step back, Jake, and so you can see it a little more. There, now you can lean down. There's a right side shirt. That's awesome. Thank you, Jake. So they can go to www.ptpublic.com/RSBN if you want one of those. All right, so Sean Spicer did his briefing today. We'd love to get, while we're doing this post show, we would love to get your feedback on the briefing or just generally about any of the issues Sean Spicer talked about. So we have the General Flynn story, and we have, he talked about appointing, President Trump is starting to appoint some federal judges. He's going to come out with, I think, a list of 10 of them today that he's nominating. I'm sorry, he can nominate them. They have to be confirmed by the Senate, but presumably they'll be confirmed. So there's that. There was, anyways, a bunch of stories. You know, there's the health bill. I don't know if he was asked about the health bill today. He was asked about some stuff about the fight against ISIS. So any thoughts you have about either the briefing or any of the stories going on in the news right now, would love to hear from you. Direct message me on Twitter at Lookner, at Lookner, or email me, steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. Speaking of which, there were a couple messages that I want to get to that I hadn't gotten a chance to read before, that people already sent me. And Deborah Lee, during the briefing, wrote, "Here we go. Flynn, Flynn, Flynn. Let's count. Hashtag Monday morning drama. Hashtag move on." Thank you, Deborah, for writing in. GSB.UK writes in, "Hey Steve, you're spot on about Flynn. The crooked mainstream media will talk about this forever and a day, just so they don't have to report on any of the Obama and Clinton cover-ups, of which there are many. What do you think?" So, as I said during the pre-show, GSB UK, I just think they like talking about this stuff because there's two reasons. One is that a lot of people who work at these places just hate Donald Trump, and they're looking for anything they can talk about which might seem to suggest bad things about Donald Trump, and confirm them in their hatred of Donald Trump and their conviction that he is the worst person ever, also. I do think, though, there is this thing, and I haven't talked about this hardly at all, but I do think there's this aspect to this stuff, which is I really think the mainstream media, a lot of it sees ratings and subscriptions and money in anti-Trump coverage, and that there is top-down orders at some of these places to do more anti-Trump coverage to increase ratings. Now, I will say this, strictly from a business angle, I could see that as entirely justified. If you're just a business, well, I can make an argument about this, but I'm not saying that it's not, I guess, I don't want to deny that media organizations are businesses, because they are. So they do have a right to try to make their money the way they want to. I'm just saying, though, that you should keep this in. I think it's important to keep in mind when looking at any media source, are they a business, and how might their product be affected by their business? So, as an example, Washington Post is a clear example. I noticed once President Trump got elected, and sometime around between November and January, remember one day I was looking at the Washington Post and I noticed I tweeted about it, I want to say the top 13 headlines, if you went to their website, the top 13 headlines, I'm not exaggerating, were all anti-Trump stories. And I was like, this is I couldn't believe it that there was this many of the top, it was the top 13. But then I started seeing that that kind of thing happened every day in the Washington Post. And to me, the most obvious explanation for that, and the one that makes most sense, is that not only is the Washington Post liberal leaning, but this is a concerted choice It's a choice made from the top down. It's coming from the top to increase their readership. They're a business. It's run by Jeff Bezos, or I never remember which one it is. I want to say Bezos, maybe I'm wrong. But they're trying to stay in business and make money. And to me, they have decided what makes them money is anti-Trump coverage, because it's too much of a coincidence that the top X number of stories are always anti-Trump in the Washington Post. Now I'll say this, the New York Times to me is clearly the same as well, because the New York Times, they used to be the paper of record, and I used to really respect the New York Times because that was the one place you could go where it was like just the facts, and it was really well written, and they gave you lots of information and really well organized, and you could read a story about in the New York Times to get all the important background points, and really great. And that I saw, I'm not talking about the opinion pages, I'm talking about just the news stories. I did not see overt bias there. I read it for years and years and years. And just in the last year or two, since Trump started running, they became very anti-Trump, and there's a lot of like opinion pieces masquerading as news stories there. But it's gotten to the point there where I really feel with the New York Times, there has been a top-down order to increase anti-Trump coverage because it's a business decision. The New York Times is a big business. It's a company. They need to make money. Now, in that case, though, I think they're intentionally... So let me raise a couple points here. First of all, I keep, President Trump has tweeted a couple times like the failing New York Times, and then I've heard people say, it's not failing, they've gained all these subscribers recently. The thing is, though, I think an argument could be made that even though they're gaining subscribers, they're worsening their business overall. And here's why I think this. I really am sad because I feel like the New York Times has chosen in the last year and a half to go with anti-Trump, an anti-Trump overall feel for the anti-Trump, I don't want to say if bias the right word, but definitely anti-Trump leaning news coverage at the expense of, they had this reputation that was built up. I don't know when the Times started, but I want to say it was like it's over 100 years or decades or whatever. If you told me it was over 100 years, I'd believe you. Could be over 200 years. I don't know. But anyways, over a long period of time, the New York Times has had this reputation for being like the paper of record, the paper where you go to see the facts, the paper where you can get like the best news coverage, just telling you about what happens. I'm not talking about the opinion pages, I'm talking about the news stories. And that was the one paper I looked at for everything, like if I wanted the real facts and wanted to trust it and wanted the best perspective on everything. And to me, I think they've gone anti-Trump, not just because of people who work there anti-Trump, which I'm sure they are, but to me, I think they've gone that way as a business decision. But the thing is, they've given up in doing that something valuable they can never get back, which is their reputation, their amazing, sterling reputation for being the paper of record, and being like the best, most objective, most respected, most... the most informative paper. And so even if in the short term that gains them subscriptions, I think there's an important loss in the long term, not just in terms of reputation as a news gathering organization, but from a business perspective. Because to me, that's where they stood out from a business perspective, was the one place, like people from all over the country would subscribe to that because they wanted a certain, they wanted like the best media organization in terms of objective, informative coverage. And President Trump's not going to be in the office forever. And, with President Trump, he's like a celebrity and people want Trump coverage. But whenever he leaves office, no matter who takes over, probably will be more of a typical politician type person. And now the New York Times can't rely on anti-Trump subscriptions. And so, and now they've thrown away their reputation, and they no longer have that market to themselves of like, we're the one paper that's really objective and gives you like the best news and informative coverage and like total, like we do it better than anybody else. They in a non-biased way. They don't have that anymore. So I feel, not only is there a long-term like reputation as a news gathering cost to them, that they've thrown away this reputation and what they had that they built up over decades. But also, I think there's a business cost to them to this. So I have a dispute with people who say, oh, well, they're actually doing very well and not failing because they've gained subscribers under Trump. Well, they've gained subscribers under Trump because they've thrown away their reputation and everything they've built up to go anti-Trump. And it's a temporary gain because a lot of people out there just want anti-Trump stuff, but they're not going to be wanting this paper when Trump isn't president anymore, no matter who's president after him. And the people who were subscribing to you, who'd be willing to pay for your paper because of the kind of great thing it was, are not going to want that anymore because you're not that anymore. So anyways, that's a very long answer to your question, gsb.uk. But to take it back to your question about the mainstream media coverage of this Flynn story, that's where I got started on this. So I think part of the media jumping over all these Flynn stories, which actually aren't that important, and giving them way more precedence than they deserve, part of it is that a lot of people who work at these places don't like Trump, but part of it is a business decision. I really do. I would be utterly shocked if at CNN and MSNBC there weren't multiple very high-level business meetings over the last number of months since Trump has been running and gotten elected, where the meetings looked at, they took out their breakdown of the numbers, which I'm sure they do. They have minute-by-minute breakdown of analysis of their ratings compared to what they're talking about on screen. I'm not there, but I pretty much know they do that because that's just how they do things. It's a big business. Why wouldn't they do that? So I'm sure they have that analysis. And in these meetings, I'm sure they've gone over and looked at it and they said, like, look at what's happening. When we do Trump stuff, it rates higher. And when we do anti-Trump stuff, that rates even higher. So I would be utterly shocked if there weren't business meetings, numerous ones that have taken place at CNN and MSNBC and other news networks and news organizations, where they said, you know what? Maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing to feature these kind of stories more because they do well. And they're a business. I mean, they have every right to do that and to make money. I'm not saying we should disallow them from doing that. Although I think as a news organization, it gets a little iffy because you're trying to pass yourself off sometimes as a news organization as like unbiased. And you don't always disclose why you're doing the things you do. So news organizations, it gets a little iffy there. But aside from that, my point is just as a media consumer, it's important to be aware of that many of these media organizations are businesses and business decisions factor into their coverage. They're really big businesses with a lot of money being invested, often owned by public corporations which have to answer to stockholders. So business considerations are going to come into play there. So when they talk a lot about General Flynn, this General Flynn story like today, which should not be talked about so much, but it is, a part of that is, I think, because it plays into their what I think is going on, which I think there is a top-down order at a number of these places to try to do anti-Trump stuff when you can because it increases ratings. So that's another part of my answer to your question, gsb.uk. Okay, so right now it's 2 p.m. We're going to go a little while longer, but then we're going to get off the air so we can show you the live coverage from the Senate Judiciary Committee of the Sally Yates and James Clapper testimony. If you'd like to write in on the Sean Spicer briefing or any of the events going on today, write me on Twitter at Lookner, at Lookner, or direct message me, or email me, steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. Ryan writes in, Ryan says, if Obama truly had concerns about Flynn, they should have pulled his clearance. Everybody knows Obama didn't like Flynn. It was a personal vendetta. So Ryan, you are agreeing with what Sean Spicer said in the briefing. Sean Spicer made those 2 points. Sean Spicer said, it's no surprise that Obama didn't recommend Flynn because Flynn spoke out against Obama administration policies and Obama didn't like him. And Sean Spicer also said that if they had such worries about Flynn, they should have pulled his security clearance. And even after they fired him, they did not pull a security clearance. So you agree with Sean Spicer. Thanks, Ryan, for writing in. I know somebody sent me an email. I think R. Rhett sent me an email during the briefing, so I want to get to that. R. Rhett writes in, hi, Steve. The Flynn story is why the failing New York Times is fake news. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel called out CNN and the New York Times today as fake news for their false coverage of Hamas' new policy statement. Hamas still has the destruction of Israel as its main goal. North Korea also is defying the U.S. government by capturing U.S. citizens. Blessings are. I hadn't seen that story about Netanyahu calling out Israel, calling out CNN and the New York Times. Arret, I'll look that up. Arret, though, thank you for bringing up the North Korea story. I will say I'm surprised this story isn't getting a little more attention, and also that the Trump administration hasn't spoken about it more publicly, and that President Trump hasn't tweeted about it. So, to go over the story, in the last couple weeks, 2 different American citizens have been taken into custody in North Korea. They were both working at this university there, and North Korea has claimed that each one of them was involved in subversive activities. I forget what the actual language is, but it's something like they're working against North Korea, trying to subvert it or overthrow it, or hostile acts against North Korea or something like that. So, this to me, because I remember, if I remember right, there was that incident that, if I remember right, when President Trump was running for president, he was upset about the way our soldiers were treated. There was an incident where we had people on a boat, and it was sort of the boat strayed in, I believe, to Iranian waters, and Iran took these people, these soldiers, these Navy officers or Navy soldiers into custody, and they made them sit on a boat on the ground for a while and didn't treat them particularly well. And it was kind of embarrassing that they were making them just sit there in custody. And if I remember right, I haven't looked this up, but if I remember right, President Trump was quite upset about this and said, we shouldn't be, I know a number of people were upset about this and said, we shouldn't have American soldiers treated this way. And I apologize if I got this wrong, but I do remember people were complaining about it. But I really do think President Trump was upset about this. But President Trump also more generally was concerned during the campaign with other countries respecting the United States and respecting the military. And that's why when this North Korea thing happened, to me, when I heard about these, I think the second one happened yesterday, the day before, I was thinking, President Trump's going to be all over this because he's going to say, we can't have American citizens being disrespected around the world, and this is something he'll speak out about. It's not to say he won't, but I haven't seen him tweet about this. Sean Spicer didn't say much about it during the briefing. He basically answered the question about it by saying, you should ask the State Department. Now, maybe, I don't know if there's something going on where there's sort of secret back channel contacts being made with North Korea. Maybe President Trump is hoping to have some kind of negotiation with them where they give up their nuclear program, and he doesn't want to upset them by coming out strongly against North Korea taking these citizens into captivity, and maybe they're could be even called hostages at this point, not sure. It depends on whether you think they really were doing the hostile acts that the North Korean government says they were. But it seems possible they're taking them as hostages to turn them over in some negotiation. So, perhaps there's a reason President Trump has not really spoken out about this. But to me, this seems like the kind of issue I would expect President Trump to come out strongly about and to say, North Korea, you let them go. Do not mess with the U.S. You should respect us. This is total disrespect. I'm not going to let you do that. And we haven't yet seen that from President Trump. We might, but I'm interested in seeing where it is, whether we do, and if not, why. So, thank you for asking about that. Let's see. Let me see really quick if I can see Trump about Navy soldiers Iran captured. I want to see if I can find a story about this when this happened. I see the stories. Here we go. Look, here we go. This is from Business Insider, January 12th, 2016. Donald Trump warns after Iran holds U.S. sailors, the Iranians like to taunt us. So he did talk about it. Let's see. So the quote in this article is like, he said, the boats got captured. Now maybe by the time we get out, we get them back, but maybe not, because the Iranians like to taunt us because they don't have respect for our readers, right? So that's an example where President Trump did talk about the Iranian soldiers being captured and talking about how this was happening because they don't have respect for our leaders. And that just, I would expect him to maybe say something similar about this North Korea situation. Haven't heard it yet. We'll see what happens. Okay, another message from Greg. Greg Jackson writes in. Sean should tell the reporters what the person in Louisiana made famous. Don't get stuck on stupid. So that's from Greg. Greg, apparently you were not a fan of some of the questions in the briefing today. John Dubs writes in. Steve, what's your take on the health care bill on pre-existing conditions will be left up to each state? I ask this because most middle-class people around the age of 40 and above have a pre-existing condition, myself included. Will we be covered? My 63-year-old girlfriend says no, along with my daughter. Are they correct? So your question is, the House version of the AHCA, the one that was passed, leaves it leaves the decision whether to keep the Obamacare rule on pre-existing conditions up to the states. That rule in Obamacare is that health insurance companies cannot charge any more to people for having pre-existing conditions. So no matter what health problems you have, you get charged the same as somebody else your age. The House bill says that's left up to the states. So states can opt out of it as long as they make some other provision for people with pre-existing conditions. So even according to the House bill, there will be some provision for people with pre-existing conditions. It's not like they won't get any coverage at all. The question is, what will that provision be? Might it be some like high-risk pool where they have to pay higher premiums? Now, there's this question of whether the Senate will keep that will have that be part of their bill or not. I think it's certainly possible to a decent degree that the Senate will actually keep the pre-existing conditions stuff from Obamacare, or they will do something to it to modify it, but not nearly as much as the House bill did. So at least for now, I don't think the House version of the pre-existing, I don't think the way the House bill handles pre-existing conditions will be ultimately in the Senate bill and will ultimately be in the final bill if there is a final bill. We'll see what happens. So that's one question. I don't know what exactly will happen about that. I want to say something else about this too. This leads to a general problem, though, with health care, is that, in theory, everybody should be covered for everything. And it stinks that we don't have enough money to do that. And a problem we're going to run into is how much to cover with how much it costs. And the problem with not just saying, let's just cover everything for everybody and have the federal government do that, which is just too expensive, is then you start have to saying, well, this isn't covered and that isn't covered. And there's no way to say that shouldn't be covered or we can't cover that without hurting some group with health problems financially. So, and it's very easy, no matter when somebody says, I think this shouldn't be covered, someone's going to always be able to say, that person's evil. That person wants somebody else to be sick and die. And as I've said before, that's not, you can want the federal government not to cover everything and yet still not want anyone to get sick or die. You can just think, well, we don't have the money to cover it. So the pre-existing conditions thing is important, but I think it's, I also think there's something to be said for not wanting people, whether you have a pre-existing condition can very often not be up to you. Like you might have a gene that causes you to have some kind of cancer. That's not your fault. So I think there's something to be said for the view that people shouldn't be unduly financially punished for some random thing that wasn't their fault. which is an argument you might give for why pre-existing conditions shouldn't cost more to insure than non-pre-existing conditions. But more generally, I want to make the point that when somebody says, like, the Republicans want to have health insurance not cover X, very often that's portrayed as the Republicans want people to die, or the Republicans are causing people to get sick and die, or the Republicans are heartless. And it's like, well, no, the Republicans, might be saying, we just don't have enough money to pay for this, and we want to be responsible, and we got to make cuts, and there's no good way to do this, but we got to pick something to cut, so let's try to do this the best way we can. But there's no good way in the sense of there's going to have to be cuts, and we can't cover everything. So, it's I get annoyed when I see people talk about, like, any kind of bill that wants to not fully cover health care for everyone as saying, like, oh, well, according to that bill, people are just going to die. That bill's going to kill people. And not addressing the issue. Well, we don't have enough money to pay for maximum coverage, so we gotta do something about it. We gotta restrict coverage somehow. So how do we do that? Okay, thank you for the question, though, John. And so John, I hope you get covered, and I assume there'll be pre-existing conditions. There will be something done about, but I don't know if it'll look exactly the same as Obamacare. Let's see here. I want to check. GL says, question from Common Sense. From the chat room, I know. From the moderator from the chat room. Thank you, moderators, for moderating the chat today, by the way. Appreciate it. Common Sense, if my email opens, if this page opens, I can read your email. Never easy to open. It's like when I click on the top email, it doesn't open, and then I have to refresh the page. I don't like this work web page email. It doesn't work well. It's impossible. I can't open this email. I sort of don't want to say the name of the company because I don't want to badmouth them on the air, but their work web page for their work email just stinks, and it's very hard to open things. Okay, Common Sense writes, and hello, Steve, with all the reports coming out about the percentage of younger people who get their news, hello, Steve, with all the reports coming out about the percentage of younger people who get their news on the internet, and as the older population who get their news from television is shrinking, what do you think is the future of network news shows? Common Sense. This is an excellent question, and I think you could also ask this question about cable TV in general. So as you say, Common Sense, younger people tend to watch less TV and do get more stuff online, whereas older people don't. And also, the number of people cutting the cord and not subscribing to cable TV or satellite TV has gone up. Cable subscriptions are dropping. So it does seem like in the future we're going towards this world in which, it's not like, because right now, like cable TV and satellites, like you get this box and you basically have to choose from among these big packages. And like, you're not allowed to choose, like, I just want channels 1, 2, 7, 105, 116. You don't get to pick and choose your different channels. You got to choose from these giant packages. When it comes to online, maybe we'll start seeing things where people choose individual channels or they watch individual channels, and it's not about these big packages, and networks have to survive or fall based on how many individual people are willing to pay for that specific network, not pay for a package with that network in it. So as to where the news networks go, it's hard to say where they go because of that, but perhaps one might wonder, will you not? Because right now, with cable TV, there's only so many channels it can have and only so many slots. And like the news channel slots are all CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. And, so is it possible that with the transition from like the cable model to like the a la carte internet model, if that's what ends up happening, would you still see like, well, there's only 3 big news channels, or might there be like more little ones, or will there still be an appetite for just a couple big ones? What will it look like? I don't honestly know. I'm sure there are some smart people out there who've like researched this and have a better guess than me, but it might look very different. I don't know, but we'll see. You wonder also, will it end up splintering in that, like, instead of like big news channels, you have more little ones that try to appeal to more niche demographics, or will there still be big ones that try to appeal to like more general demographics? And will they be able to have their big budgets anymore if they're just surviving on individual subscribers and not being on big cable systems? I don't know. It's a fascinating question. I wish I knew more about it. So, but it's a good question. So I do think things will change. I just don't know exactly how. Let's see here. I also want to go back and just say really quickly, John Dubb's question about healthcare. I do think John makes a very good point, which is that like it's good to keep in mind that so many people have pre-existing conditions, and that that is whatever happens with them affects a lot of the people because it's just it's such a big part of the population. So it is important what happens. Okay, it is okay. So we only have a couple minutes here because we're going to get off soon because we're going to have the live coverage of the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings where they're going to have testimony from Sally Yates and James Clapper. So and that's the hearings on the Russia investigation. And I know a lot of you might not agree with some of the things being said at the hearings, but we want to broadcast it anyway because we want to give you the option to watch it. So we know it's a story that whatever your thoughts on the story, you might be interested in the hearing. So we're going to bring that to you live. Somebody else asked a question, which I haven't said yet. Where is it? God's spokesman asks, "Hi, Steve. Your thoughts again about a new Fox-type channel starting, and if you can, what's happening with O'Reilly leaving?" So, I've heard these rumors that there might be this channel starting. Besides, that's like a sort of rival to Fox because. I guess some investors have been looking into it, some big investors, and that O'Reilly in theory is available and somebody like Tony Lauren's available. And, maybe investors might think, hey, there's a lot of conservatives out there who don't like Fox. This is a big niche. To really get whether that's possible or not and how possible it is, I would need to know more about the cable industry and about making money in it and stuff, because you can't just I don't think it's easy to just if you start a channel, just get on cable systems. You have to get access and get to be one of the channels, say on Charter, or get to be one of the channels on Time Warner. You can start your channel, but if it's not distributed in a lot of places, it's not going to make a lot of money. So I don't know how that works enough. And I certainly think there is an opening for another conservative channel, especially if there's a perception. Well, first of all, just because Bill O'Reilly's there. If there's another cable channel and they can get Bill O'Reilly, that'd be a big personality. And but I also think, Fox is conservative, but it covers things a certain way. And also there might be this risk that Fox is going to become less conservative. We've heard rumbles about this. I say risk in that it might be a risk to people who like conservative coverage. So I can see this being on people's radar, investors' radar. In terms of what form it would take and if it was really possible, you'd have to know more about the financials of it. Like, for example, if they ever hired somebody like Bill O'Reilly, that's a ton of money. Like, Bill O'Reilly's not going to work for less than double-figure millions of dollars. So can you hire the talent you need to and put in the money you need to and still make money? I don't know. So it's a business question, but it could happen. That's not really insightful for me to say it could happen, but I think there's I do think there's a market for it out there. I just don't know if it's a market which, given all the other constraints, can be profitable. We'll see. Let's see here. We have, did I catch up on my email? I think I might be all caught up. So I think we're going to wrap it up now. Oh, what, Jake? Jake? Yes. Oh, well, to repeat, yeah, so we're going on at 2:30 p.m. So it's 2:20 right now. So I'm going to get off the air now so we can set up the Sally Yates thing and have that ready to go for you. Thank you for watching today, Sally Yates and James Clapper testimony. Watch it on Right Side. It'll be coming on at 2:30. The event's already created, so you can find it. Search Sally Yates and James Clapper at Right Side YouTube. You can find it there. Thank you for watching, everyone who watched. Thanks for all your comments. Thanks to the moderators for moderating. Thanks to Jake Seals for producing. If you want to donate if you want to follow us on Twitter at RSB Network, subscribe to us on YouTube and hit the notifications bell. You can follow me on Twitter at LookNerd. You can follow Jake on Twitter at JacobRSBN Music. And please donate to us and help keep us on the air. Your donations keep us on the air. You can donate at rsbn.tv/donate or hit the $sign in the chat room during RSBN programming. Have a great day. I hope you tune into our coverage of the live coverage of the hearings in the Senate. And Nick, no, there's no shows tonight, but we might have news on shows soon, so we'll keep you posted on that. And that's it. I'll see you soon. Have a good day.